Active Directory portion of this course, because that's when things get really juicy. Right now, we're just going to keep it simple, stupid on a lot of this stuff. It might feel really easy or very, very straightforward, depending, but I promise this is just going to keep building and building and building until we have a pretty big understanding on this. And there's going to be a lot of repetition and a lot of practice. And I think that's the best way to learn. So from here, I'm going to do a brief enumeration on SSH, how we can do enumeration with SSH. And then we're going to talk other items of enumeration and talk research. What are we doing? We've been collecting all this information and putting it into a text document. And you're probably like, so what? What can we do with it? And that's where things get exciting. And that's how we start to lead into exploitation. But we got to do a little bit more research first before we can get there. So that's it for this video. I'll catch you over in the next video when we are enumerating SSH. So now let's take a look at SSH. So from the original scan, we saw that it was open, and we saw open SSH 2.9 P2. So we're going to copy this and just make a note of that in our notes as well. I think that's important. So we'll just say SSH. We've got the version there. So let's take this and let's do a little bit of enumeration and talk through it. So sometimes you're going to get a scan back, and your scan's not going to have really a version here. It's just going to say SSH. And we can go and try to find that out ourselves, and it's always good to attempt that. What we're going to do is we're going to attempt to connect to SSH to this specific port and see if it gives us any information about what's running. And that's really it. At this point, that's most of the enumeration that we can do. Anything with SSH, the second that we attempt to make a login attempt is going to be exploitation. Even if we just try one password guess, that's exploitation. So we're not going to do that right now. We're going to save that for the exploitation part of the course. But I do want to show you a connection and just something funky with this anyway. So let's go ahead and just go to our terminal. And the typical way to SSH, if you've never done it before, is you just say SSH, and I want to SSH to a specific IP address. So this is the IP address I want to SSH to. The issue with this box is old. So when we go to try to SSH to it, it's going to say this, hey, we haven't found a matching key exchange. So they're giving us a few different offers here. We're going to have to type in a little bit of syntax. This is not common, but this is also useful to have in your notes because this does come up occasionally. So we can just say a -o, and we're going to type KEX like this, and then algorithms equals +. And I'll stall for just a second so you can catch up. And then I'm going to copy this one here, and then I'm going to paste it. And you're going to see we're going to get one more error. And this is going to ask about a cipher. So it says there's no cipher found. We're going to do a -c for cipher. We're just going to copy this, and we're going to paste it. And this should now provide the opportunity to connect. It says the authenticity can't be established. We've got an RSA fingerprint. Do you want to connect? We're going to type in yes. Okay. And what's happening here is it's asking us for a password. There's nothing here for us. So I'm going to hit Control-C. Why did we do this? Why do we even attempt to make this connection? Well, sometimes what happens is a banner is exposed, and the banner will say, hey, we're running SSH version XYZ, and this is built by this person, by this company, etc. So here we're looking for a banner. Unfortunately, there was no banner. So that doesn't give us a lot of information, but fortunately for us, when we had our scan here, we were able to pull down at least the open SSH 2.9 P2. So that's it. And I told you in the beginning, SSH isn't very exciting because there's not a lot of opportunities for like remote code execution. Really, the way we're going to have to do this is hammer it with brute force, and we'll talk about the reasonings why later. But we'll have to hammer it with brute force and just pray. Spray and pray, as we like to call it sometimes. But for now, that's it for SSH. So we're going to start moving into research, different tools we can use to research vulnerabilities, and additional videos on that. So I'll catch you over in the next video when we start digging into some of what we found. Let's talk now about identifying and researching potential vulnerabilities. So we have our notes here, and all I've done is move them off of Notepad and into Cherry Tree, because Cherry Tree is a bit more visual and bigger font for us on video. And I made two nodes. I made the main node here of notes, and then I made a child node here of vulnerabilities. So if we recall from our notes, we have 80 and 443, and we've identified some findings that we're going to write up on a pen test report. And those findings are, a default web page, 404 page was giving a little bit of information disclosure, and the server headers were disclosing some information as well. On top of that, we've identified some information that we need for research. Now we've got 80 here, and on port 80, we've got this Apache, this mod SSL, and this open SSL that we could research. And when we ran our NICTO scan, we identified something potentially juicy here, where mod SSL 2.8.4 falls in line with this, which is 2.8 and 7 or lower, which we are vulnerable to a remote buffer overflow, which may allow a remote shell. Remote buffer overflow, meaning that we don't have to be local, we can be remote, which we are, and we can gain access via remote shell, meaning we can gain access to that machine. So that's good. That's really good. The other one here we see is SMB, and we identified Samba version 2.2.1a. We also identified a Webalizer version 2.01, and we've identified OpenSSH 2.9 P2. So for this video, we're going to target the low-hanging fruit, and I put this in order of how I would attack it. Now, again, I always think 80, 443, and 139.445 are the juiciest to me. This Webalizer might be juicy. OpenSSH, probably not that juicy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and research 80 and 443, and then we'll research the SMB as well, and then I'll leave you to do a little digging on these just as practice, and we can see where we go. So from here, we're just going to go out and open up Firefox, and we'll go out to Google. And on Google, we can pick and choose which one we want to research here. Now, this mod SSL 2.8.4 is probably the juiciest of the items, and we might want to start there. So let's just say something like mod SSL 2.8.4. You see the 2.8.7 exploit showing up, by the way. We'll just do 2.8.4 exploit, and we'll see what comes up. Now, naughty words. We'll just call it open luck, okay? And you can see, don't cheat, chapter16 is coming up as well. But we're gonna go ahead and just open this Apache mod, and then we're gonna also open this GitHub one. And I'll cheat a little bit and tell you why here in a minute. So, Apache mod SSL 2.8.7, less than 2.8.7. Scroll through here, and it just has the code for us. Now, this is where you have a chance to come through and read the code. Now, it looks like to me that they're just identifying, if you've never seen a buffer overflow, which you probably haven't, there will be one later in the course, it's identifying where it's going to have the architecture, right? So the architecture has its own identifier. So depending on, which it looks like this works for quite a bit of different architectures of Linux, depending on which Linux you're running is this return address here. So that's all this is doing. And then there's going to be code down here, I'm guessing, for an overflow, which you see a bunch of A's. As you're going to see later in the course, this is just overflows. So you'll learn to read this over time. Again, like, you do not have to code this. You do not have to be, you don't have to be super good developer, but just understanding kind of what's going on and making sure that, the code that you download is safe on your computer and it's good to go. Now, this is coming off exploit database, so you can, I wouldn't say assume, but you can trust it for the most part that this is safe code. You have the option here to download the exploit, and you actually have the option to download the vulnerable app as well if you ever want to build out a machine and play on your own. So we have a little bit of information here that it just says, hey, this is less than 2.8.7 OpenSSL, and we've got a remote buffer overflow. There's nothing else here. But that's okay. This might be good for us. This is something that we need to note. So we can copy this, and I would put it here, and we could just say something like 8443 potentially vulnerable to, we'll call it open luck, and then we'll just put it here. And we should also save this open luck. And I'll cheat a little bit and tell you guys why. Is because this the exploit database one, without saying bad words, is not going to allow us to work. It's not going to work. The exploit's a little dated, and that's why there is a GitHub one out there that actually does work. So we're going to utilize the GitHub one instead when we do get to the exploitation section. So a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a foreshadowing, we are going to utilize this exploit. So we could also go in and research. We could say Apache HTTPD 1.3.20, copy that, and come to Google and just say, hey, I wonder if there's an exploit for that. And you would just search something like this. And you can see in here, Apache 1.3.20 is actually showing up in this vulnerability as well. So that's good. And then sometimes we see these websites like this CVE details. These are okay to look at. They're all right. Like, you come in here and what you want to look for is the score. Immediately my eyes shift to the score. I don't care about anything else. If I see something that's red, I get excited. But we see no red here. So I don't think that necessarily this is vulnerable to like a remote code execution. It's got a lot of denial of service, but I would want to see like a high score, which means a critical. That's what red is. Red is critical. So we've got high, moderate, and low here, but we don't have a critical one. So this doesn't look like it really probably has anything, but it is tied to this, which is another wheel spinning indicator here that, hey, you know what, we probably got an exploit here with this thing, or at least something that we should try. And that OpenSSL is tied directly to this mod SSL, so we don't really have to research it. Now let's move on to Samba here, Samba 2.2.1a. Let's copy this and let's check for an exploit. So just as simple as doing this and saying exploit. And we've got a few here. We've got this Samba 2.2.8 remote code execution. We've got Samba 2.2.x remote buffer overflow. And we've got one down here, which I love to see. This is Rapid7. So let's go to Rapid7 first. Why do I like to see Rapid7? Well, Rapid7 makes Metasploit. So it looks like this exploit is called Samba trans2 open. And let's read a little bit about the description. So it says, this exploits the buffer overflow found in Samba versions 2.2.0 to 2.2.8. That meets our criteria. This particular module is capable of exploiting the flaw in x86 Linux systems, that's important to know, that do not have the no exec stack option set. Note, some older versions of Red Hat do not seem to be vulnerable since they apparently do not allow anonymous access to IPC. So remember, we did get anonymous access to IPC earlier when we connected to it via our SMB client. We never got access to admin. We could never do anything in IPC. We tried to say ls and it said denied, but we still logged in. So we do have anonymous access to IPC. That's interesting. And we are potentially running against an x86 Linux system, so that's interesting as well. It looks like we're potentially meeting some of the requirements here. Now, here is where this is great. You scroll down here and you see module options. And look, this is Metasploit. It gives you the module options. It says, hey, use exploit Linux Samba trans2 open. And then it tells you, hey, how to do this. And then you're good to go. That's really nice. I really like that. So I'm going to copy this one. And we'll just come to our notes and we'll say something like 139, potentially vulnerable to trans2 open. And we'll just paste the link here. And we can come read these as well. So this is the trans2 open overflow here. This looks like the manual version of the trans2 open overflow. It looks like it is a Perl script. And again, it looks like an overflow. So you'll learn to read these and see what they look like just over time. but you just want to look at the code, make sure everything's good to go. You will need to run this with Perl. It gives you the options here, trans to root Perl, what option to select, what target type to select, your IP address, and your target IP address. So we'll save this one as well, why not? And we'll take a look at the other one, just see what it is. And it looks like it could work for us, remote root exploit for Samba 2.2.x that works against all Linux distributions. Samba.c. I think this is a possibility as well. So this is C code here. We're going to go ahead and just copy this. And we'll go ahead and add this to our list as well. And we'll figure it out. So all we're doing right now is the research. Okay, so from here, I've showed you the Google way. Let's say for some reason you want to do this on the fly, you want to use another tool, or you're in a network and the network has no access. You have no internet access out. You have no research capabilities. You can go to the terminal, and there's a great way to research this as well. So let's go back up to our notes and take a peek. Now let's take this Unix Samba 2.2.1a, for example. And let's do a tool called searchsploit. Now searchsploit is going to search for the exploit database, this whole database here that we're looking through. It's brought down onto your machine. Every time you update your machine and the database updates, it updates down your machine and all those exploits get downloaded for you already. But you could say searchsploit, and maybe we search something like Samba 2.2.1a. Let's see what happens. No results. Well, okay. Why is that? Well, let's delete this. Now, you cannot be too specific with searchsploit. The more specific you are, the worse off you are, because searchsploit is searching the exact string that you are using. Now, you see that we search Samba, and it's searching for Samba and a 2. Okay, now we can start to see some things here. We see a Linux remote code execution right here. And we're going to have to look through these. Now, it's not pretty, right? It's not the prettiest, but you see the trans2open does show up. Now, it's not the easiest way. I do prefer Google. But if you're in a pinch or you want to look at all the different possibilities and see maybe, hey, is there a 2.2 in here? So like, look, Samba 2.2.0 to 2.2.8, OS X, that's not our operating system, but it's called trans2open. And we see that over and over and over again. So maybe the wheels spin again and it says, hey, trans2open, I think that that's potentially what we're looking for here. And then once we get down to the 3s, we know, hey, we've gone too far. This is not our version, etc. We could do the same thing with, let's say, the mod SSL. And we can say something like mod SSL2 if I type searchsploit in front of it and do some searching there. And we can see, okay, there's denial of service, not it, 2.8.x, potentially, right? And then mod SSL 2.8.7. And another thing to look at over here, denial of service, remote. Remote is huge. Remote means remote code execution. So learning to read these as well. Exploit, check. Unix, okay, we're running on Linux, check. Remote code execution, check. And Apache mod SSL less than 2.8.7, check. So there's 3 different versions of this, and this is kind of why when I said earlier that, they don't really work. One's been broken, they've rebuilt it. I just like the one off GitHub. So we'll play around with that one in just a little bit. But this is what you're doing. You're either going out to Google with the information that you find, or you're going to searchsploit. You're just doing research. So now we've identified a couple potential vulnerabilities, and we can go from there. So what I encourage you to do is just do some research on this Webalizer, do some research on OpenSSH, see what you can find out just for research's sake. Practice with searchsploit, practice with Google, and then meet me in the next video. So what I want to do before we get into exploitation, I want to give you a quick sneak peek at what your notes should look like so far so you can see what good note keeping is. And this is in terms of an assessment, okay? Just in terms of an assessment. And then from there, we're going to practice with some other scanning tools just to get you familiar with other things than using just Nmap. And then finally, we'll move into our exploitation. So I will see you in the next video when we look quickly at our notes. Now looking at our assessment notes so far. So you can make this however you want to make it. Whatever makes sense for you is how you should do this. Now, this is just a basic example of how I might take notes on an assessment. Now, this is just one machine. You might be scanning against hundreds of machines sometimes, and that's okay. You just make the notes against the machines and what findings you have. So for example here, I've got this machine and it's all under this one tab. And we've got some Nmap results. And then on the Nmap results, we've got the different ports that I found open. I did leave off the RPCs, but we can see our Nmap full results here. We can see, okay, on 22, I found open SSH. On 80, here's some interesting items I may have had. You know, again, this is just from our notes. Looks familiar. And then I put in the Nikto scan under here. And on 139, I've got the Samba here. And this is just notes for us. Again, could anonymously connect to IPC with SMB client, but not admin. Your client is never going to see these. So make sure you make good notes for yourself, how you can understand it. And importantly, make sure that if somebody goes through here, they can also understand it, because sometimes somebody else might need to go through your report or through your notes, or somebody might be helping you write your report. And it's important to be clear and concise with what you're doing. Now I've got an exploitation tab here. We have not exploited anything yet, but I do have a findings tab here as well. So we've got a couple findings already. We've got this wonderful default test page, and it's hard to see because I've got it on my screen that's blown up, but you saw it once. And make sure that you have the IP address or the host name in your pictures. That's important. And then information disclosure here with the 404 page. And we've got the server header information disclosure. Now these are both taken in GreenShot, and a couple things to point out just for details. I've got borders added around these, and I've highlighted where exactly the finding is. Okay, so it's best to point out, because if these screenshots are going in a report, it's best to find out and just point out to the client exactly where it is, where they need to be looking. And again, make sure you have your identifier here if you can have it. And then here is a response from the website, and again with the information disclosure. So that's just a quick example of how your notes should start to form and how they should look. And then we'll do another one after the initial exploitation to kind of show how we exploited this machine and how we might take some notes for the client as well. And then you'll get to see this all over again in the sample report when we cover report writing towards the end of the course. So that's it, just a quick lesson just to make sure you're still keeping up with your notes. I'm going to harp on this throughout because it's very, very important. So I will catch you in the next videos, the next little mini chapter on some additional scanning tools, and we'll get right into exploitation. Now it's time to play around with Nessus. So when it comes to Nessus, Nessus is what is called a vulnerability scanner. You're going to use this quite frequently when you work as a penetration tester / ethical hacker. Basically, let's say you're doing an external assessment. Chances are that you're going to use Nessus in that assessment. Probably even right away, you might kick off your scans. Basically, you're going to send out an email saying, hey, scans are about to start. And then you're going to start your scans. And then you're going to let those scans run. And while you let those scans run, they take some time. You're going to go out and do your information gathering, maybe look for those breach credentials, try to find something juicy on the client. Then you'll come back and you'll review your scan results and see if there's anything interesting there. Same thing with internal. The process really doesn't change. We use Nessus quite a bit. So we're going to use Nessus here and just see what it looks like and how we can use it to our advantage. So let's go ahead and just go out to Google, and we're going to Google Nessus download. And we're going to go to downloads right here from Tenable. Actually, we'll download Nessus right here, sorry. And up at the top, we are looking for 64-bit Debian. So it says Ubuntu, but we're just looking for the Debian. So we're going to go ahead and just click on that and download it. We'll agree. We won't even read it. And we'll save here. And this will take a minute or so to download depending on your connection speed. So if you need to pause, go ahead and pause. Now we're going to open up a terminal, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to cd over to my downloads folder because that's where it is. And then we're going to say dpkg, which is dpackage. And we're going to install with a -i. And we're just going to say Nessus. There we go. Just tab if you have nothing in there. Capital N on the Nessus, and it should autocomplete. And then we'll hit enter. And it's going to grab the package and then start to download it here and install it. And you can see automatically it has been installed. So it says you can start Nessus Scanner by typing /etc init d nessus d start. We're just going to copy that and paste it. And then we're going to navigate to this Kali 443-8834. I cannot talk. And then you're going to see your connection's not secure. We're just going to say advanced, add exception, confirm. And here's Nessus. Now this is going to compile plugins here. So this is going to take some time. Go ahead and let this finish. And when it does, go ahead and say, we're going to download or install Nessus Essentials. Okay, and then you're going to provide it with your name, and you need a valid email for an activation code. All right. Once your activation code has arrived via email, go ahead and just copy paste and then hit continue. And then it's going to ask you for a username. So I'm just going to say H Adams for me, and then I'll just do password 123 because you know I'm super secure. And I'm not going to save, and then now it's going to take a minute. So just go ahead and pause your video, let this install, go get a drink, go get some coffee, whatever it is that makes you happy. And once your Nessus is installed and you are at a login screen, go ahead and log in and then come back to the video and we'll start from there. Whew, that took forever. All right, so we have loaded Nessus, it's installed, and now we're brought to this blank screen that says My Scans. Why is it blank? Well, it's blank because we haven't made a scan yet. So let's go ahead and go up to New Scan. And let's quickly talk about what we're capable of doing. So this is the free edition of Nessus. This means that we can scan against any private IP address. And we can scan up to 16 of those, I do believe, at one time. So remember back to the networking section of your Class A through Class C. That's what we're capable of scanning here. If you were to try to go out and scan a website or an external host, not going to happen. So we do have a couple options here. We're going to start with this basic network scan, and then we'll talk a little bit about the advanced scan. So let's go ahead and click on this basic network here. And what we can do is we can just type in something like Chapter16 for the name. And then I just always copy this because you need a description. I just like to paste it in the description as well. And then down here, it's going to say, hey, what targets do you want to scan against? Well, we're only going to provide one IP address, and that is the IP of Chapter16. And then let's go with the tabs here on the side. We've got the schedule tab. Schedule sounds exactly what it sounds like. It's scheduling. So let's say that you are into automation and you're working as a pen tester and it's a Monday morning at 8. Maybe you want to sleep in just a little bit longer. And you say, hey, you know what? I got to email a client. I'll schedule that. Email will go out at 8 o'clock. And then the email is going to say, hey, we're kicking off scans right now. And at 8:01, maybe your scan can kick off and you can schedule that to happen. And then you can wake up a little late. Pro tips there. Also, you can enable scanning for once, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So if you're in a business, you can do this on a periodic basis and get updated scan results. There's also notifications via SMTP if you have an SMTP server. Most importantly, discovery. So it's going to do port scan of common ports here. I actually like to do port scan of all ports. Again, this is the same thing as like a -P versus a -P-. You see the 1 through 65,535 here where we come down. Just common ports, I'm guessing top 1,000. So let's go down into assessment and we see scan type default. So we can scan default, we can scan for web vulnerabilities, we can scan for all web and all web complex. Let's just scan for known web vulnerabilities. If we go into complex, it's going to take a while. And this just depends on how deep into the scan you want to go. But we're just going to say for now, scan for known web vulnerabilities. And